All right. Hello and happy Wednesday. We are live back on the Welcome to My Tent podcast, and I'm excited to have a guest on today. I love Wednesdays. I love episode drop days, and they are just such a joy within my week. And Wednesdays can kind of be a slog. Fun fact, that's why I picked Wednesdays, because I personally find it to be the biggest struggle in the week. You're midweek, you're still kind of like, cute noise, and you're just simply attempting to make it through life. And Wednesdays can be a little tough. So that's why I picked Wednesdays. There's really no business decision behind it other than I don't like the day and I wanted something that was more fun for it. So there you go. But we have Alexa Sharwell on today, and she is one of the best humans I think I have ever met. She's a former Chicago girly, and she's now living in Los Angeles. She is a creative, she is a writer, she's a Reiki healer, and she does marketing as well for brands, owns her own business. She's doing all the things, but really harnessing this healing and creative energy for such good things. And I actually got to take one of Alexa's program right before I had my son. There was a lot of stuff I just wanted to get rid of, and I was holding on to. And I knew I didn't want to bring that into my motherhood journey. So at the time I was like, I don't know if I totally buy into this whole Reiki thing, but I know I just feel better in Alexa's presence. So let's go for it. And when I tell you I had visceral reactions to these sessions, I am not lying. And it was one of the craziest things I ever experienced. So she's the real deal. And she's going to tell us all of the good things about life, about healing, and about what she's doing these days. So lots of good messages in here, especially about listening to your intuition, which I'm not always great at. So it's a good reminder for both me and you, dear listeners. So let's get to it. I'll let Alexa speak for herself. I'm excited for you to hear. Okay, let's go. Hey. Hi, hello, hey, and welcome to my tent, a place to hear life experiences, different opinions, a range of journeys, and a viewpoint different than our own. A place to challenge our own thoughts, a space to learn a little bit, and I promise some fun along the way. I believe we're better when we let a range of people into our tents. So welcome to mine. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the tent. We have a very special guest today, Alexa Sharwell, who is a healer, a creative, and just a generally wonderful soul. I know Alexa from the Chicago world, but we are now actually both not in Chicago anymore. We'll definitely get into that. But I personally have been through one of Alexa's programs. She is an incredible person. Not to mention, I don't think you can see them. I have some of those crystals that you gave me sitting right over there. So Alexa, welcome in. If you just want to give a brief background on you, that would be fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to see you after some time.
Virtually see you, but
yes,
so lovely.
Yeah, a little bit about me. I am from Chicago, Alexa, and I grew up in the Chicagoland area and moved to California a year and some months ago. I moved to California at the beginning of 2022 after this, long internal battle of, is Chicago really for me? All my family and friends are here, but, it wasn't doing it for me anymore. So I packed my car, drove across the country, and here I am. I have a background working in corporate America for 7 years and left right as COVID happened. Coincidentally was the plan, but COVID kind of catapulted it forward in a quick way, which was, what I wanted, but also scary all the same. And then I moved into the wellness world of becoming a Reiki practitioner, working and supporting other wellness brands and some small businesses that I work closely with still today. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that soon. That's kind of, the short background of who I am and kind of where I've been in my adult life the last 10 years, I guess, since graduating college.
Yeah, quote unquote adult. I feel like some days I'm like, I'm trusted to be an adult. So bridging the corporate to going out on your own, you mentioned that you were in the corporate world for 7 years. In what way, what were you doing within that world and what was that background?
Yeah. I actually was at the same company all 7 years until COVID.
That's incredible.
It's funny. I actually just wrote about that in my Substack that came out this morning, like how it's like, oh wow, like I actually had the same job. And definitely like saw it as like my long-term future, climb the corporate ladder, like become really successful, like be C-suite level type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hired as a marketing coordinator, worked my way up. My team and our side of the business was very small. We had a moderately sized company for our industry, not so glamorous of an industry, but I worked directly with the CMO and one of our top executives for a privately owned company. So I was exposed to a lot of the inner workings of a company, and I wore many, many hats. So I learned how to do a lot of things from the ground up, from core marketing strategies to the sales funnel and process to things that finance should have been doing, but me and my boss were doing on the
Invoicing.
sales side.
Yep. Been there, been
Like
there.
I'm doing the financial projections for client by client when I'm a poli-sci grad and
Like,
I'm by
who
no means
gave me
qualified.
this?
Literally. Who gave the 24-year-old
Potentially
this?
helpful for where you are now. I mean, all of those
Completely.
hats, you now
Yes.
run your own, you're you're it. You are all of
Yes.
those things again.
Exactly.
And it's interesting, and I'd love to hear when you maybe started to think, because you mentioned, oh, I thought I would be doing this, climbing up the corporate ladder. You foresaw yourself in corporate for a long time. When did this maybe thought come in of like, maybe not? And how did Reiki and the holistic healing and wellness come into that?
I can't pinpoint the exact moment of when. I kind of felt like I was always kind of like climbing the ladder, but at the same time, striving for what was next too. And, in my 20s, my early 20s, I experienced a difficult loss, which kind of led me down my own path of healing. And so that loss expanded my horizons to what was out there. And so while I was, working my job day to day, 8 to 5, 6, whatever that looked like, I was also
Like 8 to 6.
long
8 to
days.
6 a.m.
Remember
8 a.m. to 6 a.m.
remember those days when we had to be in the office all day, right?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh goodness, yes. But then I was also trying to figure out, like what can make me feel better? What can make me feel different? And I started to explore so many things, but I had no intention of moving that direction. It was just really for my own well-being. And then I'd say, trying to figure out my age and the years now, I'd
Oh,
say, mid 20s.
hard, yeah. Ranges are good here. We're
Yeah,
like,
right.
that's
Like
good.
as I was like, moving past 25, 26, I started to be like, is this really what I want for my future? Like, I'm starting to make more money, but am I happy? I don't know. So those questions started to kind of formulate in my mind. And then as I really started to dedicate more time to working on myself, I really started to ponder the questions seriously. In 2017, 2018, I was like, I don't know if this is it, but I also don't know what it is. Like, is it a different job? Is it a different company? Is it, that the grass is really greener on the other side? Like, I've kind of got it good here. And so in 2018 and 2019, I really started to think, I don't think this is it at all. Like, it's not corporate for me. And I kept going back to this idea of like, I started college as a psych major, but like you just kind of had to declare something, or I think I did, and changed that because, I was guided to from, the parents above. And I was like, I've always wanted to help people, but I don't want to go back and like, become a therapist. I don't want to go back to school. Seems like a lot. It was then that notion of like, can I do this? Like, can I help people? How do I help people? Am I qualified to do that? Like, who are these people who are coaches and healers and these things? Like, I'm not one of those. So it was a lot of doubt. And as I continued to explore these modalities, I would go to this yoga restorative Reiki class in Chicago once a week. And I would leave that class and be like, I feel like I'm on another universe. Like I remember saying that all the time. She was an amazing teacher. Her name's Julianne Farrell, for any of you Chicago local listeners. She teaches at Bare Feet and another couple places. Bare Feet's in the West Loop. It was incredible. And I started to realize like, oh, this energy I feel isn't just from the restorative yoga. It's from the Reiki. Like, this is what it is. And I'd experienced some Reiki energy healing before, but that's what started to get my mind and the wheels turning. I had already kind of, experienced a lot of spiritual shifts in my life the last couple years, but this is when I was like, oh, I don't think I just want to be a life coach. I think I'm much more spiritual than I realized, and I've never let myself be that person. And so I set the plan in motion with my friend, Jack Gould, who I worked for many years at YIB, You're in Her Babe, to work for her. I was going to save money throughout 2020, work for her on the side, and then COVID happens and it's like, well, I guess they're going full steam ahead.
Yeah. Sometimes the universe, I feel like, just pushes you, and maybe you needed the abrupt shove, but that, I feel like for so many, really turbocharged a lot of stuff, which was crazy. But it's interesting that you had experienced things like Reiki before deciding to go into it yourself. And did you do certifications? Like, what is that even? I don't know. I don't know anything about how you become a Reiki healer.
As I was sitting with it internally, I wasn't really telling anyone that that's what I wanted to do. I was like, people are going to be like, you're going to be what? Like, that shit's not real.
It is though.
I know. But, I started to be like, people are going to think I'm insane.
You're a witch or something.
Yeah, no, truly, even though like
we are
myself a witch. But at the time that everything was shut down, we're all like, literally like not allowed to leave our houses. And so everyone was transitioning everything to virtual. There are different certifications you do in different levels for different types of healing. You can do Reiki 1 and learn how to do Reiki on yourself, which is the first level. And so by that June of 2020, I did my Reiki 1 and 2, which is self-healing as well as healing on others. That in itself was a spiritual experience. Like, I had some of the most profound visuals during the like Reiki placements, when you receive the hand placements that help you facilitate for others, that I've ever experienced prior to that weekend. And it catapulted me into exactly how I wanted to show up in this like new version of myself in this next phase of like my career. And a lot of us were stuck at home trying to figure that out. A lot of people had been furloughed, lost their jobs, didn't like their jobs, but were just keeping them because what else could we do?
Yeah. I feel like at that point, too scary to really make a lot of shifts. So I give you kudos for doing that. But it's also really crazy that you can do Reiki virtually. So two questions. So first, if the listener doesn't know, what exactly is Reiki?
Yes. So Reiki is one of many different holistic healing modalities. Reiki specifically is an ancient Japanese healing modality where I'm using the palms of my hands to beam energy to you. So specifically working with your physical body, your mental, emotional, and spiritual body as well, all facets of your energetic body. So I'm working with your chakras, your body, and your aura. So we can be working with all different parts to start to clear stagnant and stuck energy. The reason that it works virtually is because energy doesn't know time and space. And the reason why I kind of was like sold on it being able to work was because I started to participate in some virtual Reiki circles and moon events and Reiki lives on Instagram as soon as COVID hit in March of 2020. And I was like, oh, I feel this. And she can't even see me on Zoom. Like, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I feel tingling in my hand. I feel the energy moving in my body. Like, it was fascinating. It wasn't just that I felt the energy move, but I felt the shifts in my body too. Your chakras in your body are like these spinning discs. And when they start to have stagnant energy in them, whether that stagnant energy is emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever it's related to, they don't spin at their optimal frequency. And so when we can clear that energy, they can spin again and restore that alignment within you. And energy healing is a great way to do that. So that in short is what Reiki is. You can have similar experiences with other different healing modalities. So if you think of an intense breathwork session, you might relate to some of the experiences that I just shared, because you can have very similar reactions in an intense breathwork session too, if you've never experienced Reiki.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, even forms of yoga, I feel like can have that visceral reaction. So I actually took a course with Alexa. This was right before I gave birth. I literally think the day before I gave birth, we had our last one. It was a 5-part session working with different like chakras within my body. Like I forget if you started head down or feet up. I can't exactly remember, but something along those lines.
We
And
essentially did like mind, body, soul, spirit, and then tied them all together.
Yeah. And I really, before I had my son, wanted to get rid of some of this stuff that I was carrying, and I had been carrying for quite some time. And it's not that I am not a believer in any of this. I had never experienced Reiki. I was like, if anything, I feel like Alexa's a calming person. It'll be meditative. That first session, when I tell you, like parts of my body were on fire. I'm heating up, getting cold. I had very visual reactions to things I hadn't thought about. It was really insane. And I left that first session, was like, oh my God. I called my mom. I was like, this was the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my life. And it really does help flush some of that stuff out and get that, what I felt, just my whole body to start working together again. So it really, truly, the only thing that I can say is experience it yourself, because my hands were on fire at one point. My feet were on fire. I physically felt my blood in certain parts of my body. And there was that one session I was sobbing like uncontrollably, which was good. It was a good release, but I really did feel like it got everything back in alignment. And I'm so happy I did it before I had my son, to clear some of that space out.
It's crazy the way that the energy feels in our body when we're releasing it. And I love what you said about like certain parts of you feeling like they were on fire, because when I did my master training, which is like, I'm a holy fire Reiki master, which sounds so fancy,
mystical.
Yes. But holy fire is essentially like a subset of the traditional Reiki. And so there are different aspects of it. I believe there's like something is combined now with the master training, but alas, master means you can also train others. I have not done that yet. I've been asked to, and I'm percolating on like how to train with my hypnosis method, but we'll see where that goes later this year. But so the holy fire can kind of feel quite different than traditional Asui Reiki. Neither is better or worse. They're both so powerful. But the holy fire, when I got trained in that, right after, I was like, my hands are on fire. Like yes. I could feel it. And so people tend to tell me that, especially in their first sessions with me, because that fire energy is a bit different than the traditional.
Yeah. And what a lot of things came up for me that were unexpected, because I think subconsciously we hold a lot of this stuff. And I'm a big believer of the body keeps score type, mentality of even things that you're not realizing are tiny repetitive behaviors. Your body remembers, even if your mind is overriding them on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of things came up for me that were helpful for then after each session for me to keep considering and journal through and noodle on. And it lets you open a part of yourself that you maybe didn't even realize needed some work. And I will say some of it's hard, but I'm kind of someone who also believes that in order to have the breakthrough, sometimes you need to go through the trenches. So with how you've evolved over the past 10 years through corporate and through now, how have you incorporated some of these practices into your life? You mentioned that you've had losses or difficult periods of your life. Like, how have you taken this into your own world? Do you do Reiki on yourself frequently? Like, how do these practices show up now in your life day to day?
It's a great question, and interesting, because I was just talking about this with someone last night a little bit. I don't do self Reiki really. And I know some people who do. I think it's more so that I take some of the self Reiki like practice and bring it into other things. I have actually found like rituals and routines that stick, and it took me a really long time to get here. Most of my 20s, I've got to find a routine. I have to do this. I have to do what everyone says you're supposed to do. And they never stuck. And being rigid with myself was where I really struggled. So I'm someone who, like, in human design, a like regimented schedule is not like best for me. So like there are things that feel really good for me, but I like choose what I want to do in the morning, for example. So like if I wake up and I really want to meditate, I'll open my favorite meditation app and I'll meditate. Or if I want to write, I'll write, but I don't like have this list planned where like I have to do A, B, C, D, and E by 8:30 a.m. I definitely have things and expectations for myself that I try to adhere to. You know, it's not like
you're running a business. You can't completely go rogue and just
exactly.
You know, there's like manifestation's a thing, but you can't just sit in your bed all day and manifest money.
Exactly. And you know, it's not like I sit around and stay in bed till 10 every single day. But if my body really needs it one day, I will do that. And that day then might look like a little bit of work later in the day. And sometimes that's when my creative bursts hit me.
Yeah.
For example, related to what you asked, writing has always been something for me. And I went through a lot of waves of writing and not writing the last 10 years specifically. I've always written like my entire life, but I never shared it. And lately I've been writing a lot the last few years again. And now I've decided I'm still writing for me, but I'm going to just put it out there because I'm not going to attach to the outcomes of it, but I want to put more out there than what you can kind of put on an Instagram post or a caption, right? I want it to live somewhere. And last night I was writing about that grief that I felt when I was 23, but it surprised me the way that it came out. You know, I wasn't writing because I felt the grief or because I was sad about it. I was actually writing in a really reflective way. And I think it surprised me because it continues to surprise me that the practices and the things that I hold close and that I allow myself to continue to tap into regularly have shown me that we don't have to stay stuck in the things that have been difficult. But I mean, I will tell you that I can get very comfortable being stuck in those things from time to time, right?
Sometimes it's easier to fight the demon you know. So whether that's getting conditioned to just deal with this pain and you found ways to cope with it, knowing that it's going to take some work and challenge and effort to break the habits, it's like even though you know it's going to suck, it's easier to stay in a place that you've been than venture out. And in terms of writing, you've always done it in some way, shape, or form. What was holding you back from wanting to share that? Was it just something that you felt was too personal, too close to you? Like, what has now made you feel like you're ready to start to share this aspect? Because you've started with Reiki and now you have Substack. You're really starting to do a lot more with healing and with different modalities. Writing is a big one of that. What has now spurred you to feel like it's time to share?
At the beginning of this year, I got this like ping of, what if I'm not just a healer? And then I was immediately met with, you can't give up on that. You just started your own business. You just spun off from the way that you were doing your services the last 3 years. Like, what do you mean?
You're like, brain, what's happening here?
Like, it was literally like, absolutely not. Like, that is not allowed. And I was met with a lot of internal resistance, a lot of back and forth conversations with multiple parts of me. And these parts of me were, you know, thinking about all the different things, right? Like, well, I like doing the marketing and the strategy and the launch creation that I do for some of these other wellness and small businesses that I help support. They're not all wellness, but that's where it started.
Yeah.
You know, I like writing, but I don't put it anywhere. And I like being creative, and that goes beyond just creating a graphic for Instagram.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd definitely pigeonholed myself into this box of, I'm a spiritual healer. That's who I am. Book a session with me, set up a program. That's all I do. And I was like, what if I could be multiple things? I am multiple
There's
things.
no saying you can't. The only
Right.
people that are usually telling you can is you or me.
Exactly.
Or
Exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
In order to allow myself to do that, I actually closed my healing books and didn't tell anyone. I was in the middle of doing a program for a couple months this spring that really limited my calendar anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so between that and some of my other clients that I worked with and some of my schedule that was already set up, I was like, I'm going to close this, not tell anyone. I know this is going to result in the messages. It's going to result in the messages saying, hey, I just went to book. You have no availability. Like, are you that booked out? And it's like, I wish that was the case. That's what I've been building
you
for.
Are. You're booked for yourself.
Exactly.
Sometimes we have to shift how we think about that, because
Completely.
just because someone else isn't booking a service with you, I always mess this up even for myself. Being free doesn't mean you have time. That
Completely.
is so you were booking for yourself.
Exactly.
And that is 100% warranted.
Yes. And so that's when I just realized, like, I really want to continue to bring these brands and help people execute what they want to execute to life the way that I have been for a couple different businesses the last 3 years, and the way I did it in corporate, and now the way I've been doing it in entrepreneurship the last 3 years. The skills are married in a really cool way. I think that's what some of the fun of it was for me. Like, don't get me wrong, creating my own business and going off entirely on my own was exactly what I wanted. But at the same time, the box that I put myself in felt so small that I was like, if I don't break out of this box, I'm going to end up resenting what I love to do.
Yeah.
And so I had to create some space, and I still do a weekly meditation class for a local studio here. And I do an in-person hypnosis Reiki class for a different studio. And I'm doing some virtual clients, but I'm just not advertising it the way that I was. And my calendar will definitely open up a little bit more as I'm figuring out what this marketing business is looking like right now, because it feels exciting and it's definitely what I want to lean into. But allowing myself to be both and have both and do what I want to do, not what I think I need to do. I think taking that pressure off was the biggest factor for me.
And how, like, as in terms of your journey over the past 10 years, do you think, well, I would assume yes, because I know you're also big into therapy and journaling and all this stuff. Like, could you have done this 6 years ago? Had that same mindset? Yeah. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. I mean, 6 years ago was when I think the idea first popped in my mind of corporate isn't it, but there's no way I'm leaving this safety and security net. I also would have never even moved 6 years ago. I visited California literally a week before the world shut down in March of 2020, which is wild. And I was like visiting my friend, told her like, God, I need to move here. Came back to Chicago, told some of my friends, told my boss, I was like, I need to move to California. And the world shut down.
Just kidding. Do you also frequently, so like speaking of being witchy, like was California a message? Like did something come over you? Like when you feel a pull to do things like that, because that's a major move. Starting your own business is major. Like, yeah, we make decisions every day. Do I want a sandwich or a salad? But when something major like that happens, are you getting like witchy messages? Because you know that I get witchy messages and listen to those. But
for California, I hadn't been to Southern California as an adult in a while when I was here in 2020. The incredible sense of like calm and peace and at home I felt was so overwhelming that I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. Everything, yeah, like, I mean, yes, everything within me was just like, no, you have to go there. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out. It doesn't matter if, healing isn't it. It doesn't matter if nothing ends up the way you think it's supposed to look in 10 years. Like, you go and you'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's truly what I ended up doing. Like I had an Airbnb booked. I packed a car that I'd bought 6 days prior, and like this car is literally like not great.
You're like, we're just doing it. Pedal
Like,
to the metal. Like,
I drove by myself
oh my God.
30 hours. I mean, I took a couple breaks, but
Yeah.
it was like, I am on this soul mission and this is what I'm meant to do. I think I was 30 at the time, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Cause I'll be 32 this year. So it was like, I'm 30 and like, we're living our life just for us now.
That's the hardest thing I think for a lot of people is the expectations they think they need to live up to. I think we forget that we're people first. I know,
Yes.
I mean, I'm the worst at this. I should take my own advice, but it's like I spend a lot of my time giving to others. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, why am I so burnt out? I haven't sat down in 12 hours. But to listen to those messages, is that a practice you've also had to develop? Is like starting even from college and then into your early career, how have you really let yourself open up? At what point do you make the call? With California, like, okay, we're just going to do it and like flip a switch. Do you slow burn things? Like, do you have like rules for yourself almost of like, I'm getting this message. I don't want to be completely irresponsible. I'm feeling this. So how do we navigate that?
No, that's a great question. I think I've always been one to like stand pretty firm. Like, you know, my parents would say like she was always a leader as a kid, right? Like back then I was loud and like I'm not loud. I'm more of an introvert now.
Which is
like
so funny. You're so peaceful.
It's like I didn't know how to channel what I felt. So it like came out in like the wrong ways as like a kid and a teenager for sure. The insecurities came out as projections and deflection. Yeah. But the leader aspect, I think, was because I was sure of things, because of being told no for, you know, not necessarily the wrong reasons, but, you know, like certain things like in college or, you know, early on in my career, when, you know, you ask for something and it doesn't go the way you want. And then you're like, wait, was I wrong? Like, am I not meant for this career path? Or like, why isn't this going a certain way? Or, you know, relationship wise, like, I thought this was it. Like, what happened here? How did I not listen to my gut?
Yeah.
And so it's definitely taken practice to recognize like, what is gut? What is my intuition? What is like anxiety speaking to me? You know, the difference between the two, I've been saying this for years, is our intuition speaks in whispers and our anxiety like screams.
I love that. And it's so true.
It's so true. Like if we don't get quiet enough to listen, we're not going to hear our intuition. Although if we continue to ignore it, it will eventually yell too.
Yes. But I feel like at that point, anxiety has been taking the reins for a lot longer.
And I think with the big things, I don't usually just jump and run. So like I wanted to move. And then in the fall of 2020, I was like, all right, I'm going to move in February of 2021. I almost signed a lease and I was like, I'm doing it. And then my logical mind was like, you have to figure more stuff out. I backed out of it. I then signed a lease in Chicago and like stayed because I decided to play it safe.
Mm-hmm.
And once I was like, this was a mistake. You got scared.
Yeah.
You weren't listening to yourself.
Your anxiety yelled.
Yes. Yeah. And that's when I actually was back out here and I wasn't even in LA. I was in Orange County. And the second the plane landed, I was like, this is it. I'm not making any excuses again. And that's when I was like, I will be there by March of 2022. And I literally got to my Airbnb on February 28th. Like I made it happen. I was like, I don't care. I will find a sublease. Like I will do everything I need to do. Similar with like big shifts in career and changes I've made with those relationships and allowing myself to make those changes around, you know, like knowing when it's time to kind of part ways with working relationships, even though they're still going great and we're friends, but it's time for both of us to expand. You know, like I didn't want to necessarily like go off on my own, even though I wanted to, but like I knew it was what was best for me. And I had to honor that, but it was something I sat with and it was something that I tormented myself over for some time. And then when I continued to not listen to myself, like everything within me was like, you can't keep ignoring this.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I knew that there was going to be difficult conversations that I didn't want to have with people that I really, really cared about.
But I feel like in that aspect, people, they don't always honor you. You always hope you're met with understanding. And I think that's some of the resistance too that even I get, where I'm like, this person's not going to get it. So I just don't want to have that conversation. I just don't want to do it.
Right. And in this case, it was met with so much respect and love, and I was completely honored. But I think that's why, like you just said, we don't have those conversations sometimes. And then we ignore ourselves and we listen to ourselves, but we don't act on it, which
that's an interesting one too, because I feel like if I look through my journals and things, I have all of these things I want to do. And yes, some of them have come to fruition, like this podcast. I had that poll and I waited. I mean, I wish I had started it a lot longer ago. But I even feel like in there's things, and I don't know if this is, I'm scared to admit to myself that I want them out loud, even if they're written. Sometimes telling someone else makes it too real.
Completely.
And I can't get quite there yet. Still sort of like, I need to say this out loud, even if it's to like Tori, who would meet me with all of the love. But sometimes I'm even like, that makes it too real.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not ready to get there yet. But so it's a work in progress. I don't know if this has been the case for you, because I know this has happened to me, sort of. I lost people that hurt while you've made these shifts to be who you are and who you're aligned with. You're proud of who you are and how you're showing up now. But you mentioned being a loud and boisterous child versus who you are now. Have you lost kind of some people along the way?
Yeah. I mean, there are friendships that I am not friends with them anymore. And we were starting to grow apart years ago. And then things just kind of really solidified as the world changed.
Yeah.
I think that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah. Everyone handled that very differently.
Yes.
And some people were on the same railroad path and some people just went real different directions.
Yeah. And so if you don't have, the same values or how you want to spend your time, or, your interests aren't aligned anymore, I think it kind of became clear to me, and I'm sure many others, that unless it was a friendship or friendships that were really worth putting in the effort to kind of save,
mm-hmm.
some of them just weren't really worth it, given past circumstances as well. It wasn't just about, interests not lining up anymore.
Right. Like they're like, you're a witch. We can't be friends anymore.
Right. But I do think that there's really something to be said about when people shift and change and evolve and others aren't shifting or changing at all. It's hard for that person who isn't to see someone changing. And it's usually subconscious for that person that they can't recognize that, like, oh, like I wish I could be doing that too. And I don't know how. Mm-hmm. So they don't realize that that's what they want to be like vulnerably saying to the person. But instead it's just coming off as like various projections. And it can show up in so many ways. And it sucks because it's like, it sucks for lack of a better word.
It does. And that's a lot of stuff that I've held on to. Like so much of what I was working with you on is like, I need to show up for an entire person tomorrow. Like that was our last session. Oh, you also recorded me in meditation so I could listen to it while I gave birth. I was like, I know that within 24 hours, my time is going to be even more limited than it already is. Mm-hmm. And we hold on to, I think, to a lot of these things. And it's hard not to take those things personally when you feel like someone's not wanting to show up for you anymore, not like supporting you through trying to change to become a better person. Especially when you're putting in all this work and you're like, I'm working so hard and doing all these uncomfortable things. Like this person doesn't seem to be reacting well to that, it's hard not to hold on to those things and like hold them. And then that contributes, I feel like, to the anxiety, which is going to speak louder of then don't make this choice because it's going to hurt or it's going to be hard. So the fact that you help people release that, I think is huge, because to get rid of some of that, just like emotional, like my heart felt lighter because I take things very personal. I mean, I cry all the time. I'm a Cancer, so whatevs. But it's really, there's really something to be said about, I always say this too. I'm like, when you go to therapy, no one tells you it's going to suck at some point if you're doing it right.
100%.
And you have to strive to be the person that you are proud to be and you want to show up as. And there's going to be some stuff that comes along with that, but that's just, it is what it is.
Yep. I think people also, many of these things were themes in my Substack from today, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
I think people also really have a difficult time accepting that people change, we change, and not every relationship can or is meant to be a forever relationship.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's not going to be difficult or painful to let those relationships go. Not every relationship can serve us forever.
It's icky. It
is.
Icky.
It's not easy. And I think the more that we spend time listening to ourselves, connecting to ourselves, trusting ourselves, we unfortunately end up not wanting to put up with some of the stuff that we may have put up with in the past in those relationship dynamics too.
And as we get older, just time. I mean, there's just no time.
Completely.
I don't have the time in my day to even handle myself, let alone everyone else's emotions. Right. So that definitely takes it into consideration. And as you've now, because you're writing, you've only been releasing that for a few months, right?
Just a couple of weeks, actually.
Yeah, a couple of weeks. Where are you hoping to take some of the other creative aspects of your business?
It's funny you asked that, because a friend of mine called me like 2 hours ago and he was like, I just read this morning's piece. Like, it was so good. And he was like, have you considered trying to get your writing published? Like, you should be submitting those. And I was like, I don't know where to submit them. And he was like, well, think about it. And I was like, okay.
A book.
Yeah. And so I started writing a book in 2020. And that book, now that it's been 2.5 years since the start, it would definitely shift a little bit. But there's another book that I also started just a couple months ago that would be totally different. That one would be like free form, short poetry type stuff, where the first book that I like really started and like have things outlined, and there's a cadence of, a bit of like a memoir-y timeline type to it. It's almost like I don't know how to wrap it, because I'm like,
it's your life.
How do you
wrap a memoir when you're alive?
Right.
No,
literally. And like, I originally was like, okay, like we'll wrap it like once I like became a healer. And now I'm like, so much has already changed.
And you've picked up, you're evolving. And I feel like then that memoir would be missing all of this other beautiful creativeness that you've been embracing.
Right. And so now I'm like, like it could end with like this next chapter, because that's kind of the whole point. So yes, I am kind of right now allowing myself to just continue to write and see what happens, and then go back to like formulating the two.
Yeah. Because I feel like that was where my brain went for you, is being published and making that a facet of your business. And it was interesting that you said before, even like with your morning routine, you, I think, are someone that can have your hands in everything and be good at that, because like that is how you roll and flow. Like for me, I am like rigid type A. Like we do X, Y, and Z. We do it in this order. And if we don't, the world will end. That is just how I roll. But I feel like for you, you need to touch like so many different things, and that aligns to like you. And I feel like that's where your creative energy comes from. So I feel like you need to be published. If a publisher is listening to this, Alexa's available.
Truly.
Oh my God. Okay. So in terms of services and whatnot, Substacks, where can everyone find your work, your services? If they're local to LA, where can they find you in person? All of the good things.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I pretty much go by my name on everything.
Except you get like not troll accounts, but imposter accounts all the time.
I do, but I think they've kind of slowed down.
I swear I've had 6 or 7 of,
No, they were really bad for a while
but why?
because people will listen and then pay them and get fake, not real readings. It's crazy.
Oh, is it a common thing in the healer?
Yes, yes. Like I am not the only one.
Oh, messed up.
It's crazy.
I mean, I'll be
So,
tagging her actual everything and
yes,
actual in the show notes. So don't
my
follow
name
any
is
fake.
Alexa Sharwell, and make sure it's spelled right if you're going to follow me. Same with my website. My website, as I mentioned, has shifted more to my marketing strategy services. But I have different links in my bio that kind of adhere to all things we talked about. Strategy services, recorded, downloadable healings, my Substack. You'll find a blend of all things on my Instagram. I'm allowing that to shift to not just be about hypnosis, blended Reiki, and healing and how to weave your subconscious mind into your daily life, because that's really what it lived and breathed for the last 2 years. So you'll see just my thoughts and me.
We love that. Let yourself be. Let yourself be you.
Yes.
You don't need to be curated all the time. I know. We all know I'm not, but hot mess. But I love that you're taking this more creative, because I feel like when you talk about it, I know that listener, you can't see us, but I feel like you shine and you glow when you start to talk about the creative side of you. And I really like that you've leaned into it and started to share more. So if you want to read any of her, I know your Substack, you've uploaded a couple different pieces. And do you do it on cadence, or do you just kind of do it when it feels?
I'm going for weekly right now.
Okay. We love it. We love it. Okay, my love. Thank you for coming into the tent. You've been in my tent for a while. You are just such a glowy, wonderful soul.
Oh, so are you.
And I really appreciate you being in my circle and being open and vulnerable in your life and in your creativity and your healing. So check Alexa out. And if you have any questions, she'll be tagged and everything in the show notes. All right, love. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Welcome to My Tent podcast. I hope you had as much fun listening as I do recording. I am so happy to have you here, and see you next episode.